Today I'm going to show you how I built this table out of reclaimed lumber. And in fact, I built it out of leftover building material when I built my house. This is a project long overdue, but I sure had a lot of fun doing it. Alright, so these are the 2x12s, and these are leftover from the rafters. They're made of Doug Fir, and this one is particularly pretty. And so what I'm going to do is going to use those for the tabletop. And then I have some 6x6s, and these were used to support the house. I got a couple of those. And then I got a 4x6 up there, and then somewhere around here is a 4x4. So I think I have enough to build it. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut these to length, and then sort of make them a little bit easier to handle. And then I'll joint the edges and surface plane them. Now I need straight edges, and so the joiner is the best tool. However, if you have a lot of bow, what I like to do is take the side that's cupped this way and put it on the table saw and rip this off, and you can get it straight quicker and do a final pass on the joiner and then flip it around and square it this way on the table saw. So for this one, that's what I'm going to do. Right now I've laid these out, and I've got the left, the center, and the right, and then I put some marks so that when I run it through the planer, I can put it back this way. So we have some old paint, and on the other side, I think this one's pretty bad. I use this as scaffolding, and so I think that's mostly paint. But in case there's any grit in here, I'm going to take my belt sander and clean this up and get all of this off before I run through my surface planer, because I don't want to dull the blades. They're very expensive. And so anytime you're using reclaimed wood, you have to be pretty careful to check for nails and grit or anything like that before you run it through a planer. So I'll sand these down and get them cleaned up, and then I'll run them through. Well, after a lot of work getting those through this planer, I got them ready to go now. So I think what I'll do is glue up 2 of the boards, and then when I get that done, glue up another one and just kind of work my way into it. So I got a couple of planer marks here because I had a real hard time getting them through the planer. They're so heavy and so big. But I think I'll glue these up, and then we'll go from there and get on with this project. All right, I've changed the orientation just a bit, and I put this in the center so we'd have symmetry, because this board and that board are very similar. So the first thing I'm going to do is glue these 2 together and let them set, and then I will glue the last piece on, because I don't want to try and tackle 3 boards. It's actually pretty good. There is some variation, but not too bad. I think I can stand that out and nobody ever notice. Let those dry for an hour and then I'll glue the next one. So here's my first leg. This is tapered on two sides. We've got 3x3 on top, and then it's tapered down to probably around 2 inches or something like that on the bottom. And I used this tapering jig right here to do that. So what I'm going to do is show you how I'm going to turn this 6x6 into one of these legs. So the first thing I will do is cut it to length, because I do not want to resaw any more than I have to. So I'll do that operation and then we'll move over to the table saw. Now I've got the table upside down and I'm doing a layout of the apron and legs. And I'm going to be putting the legs fairly far to the outside so that this person doesn't have them hitting their legs. And then this works for 6 people. So you want the legs far enough apart that 2 people can sit quite easily between the legs. Now the great thing about this design that I'm doing is that everything is removable. So I'm going to be using pocket screws to attach the aprons to the tabletop. And then I'll be using this hardware to connect the aprons to the legs. And so this can all be taken apart to move it. Now these hardware pieces, what they need is a kerf cut right here. And that goes into the aprons like this. So I've got a couple of test pieces. And then you take 2 lag bolts and you screw them into the corner right here of the table leg. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in a little bit wider and go ahead and build it. And then if I want to make any changes, no problem. I can change the length of this. I can take it apart, put it back together. No glue is required, and then you can easily make modifications or move it or whatever I want to do. So the next step will be to cut these to length and do a dry fit. Well, it's time to fill the holes with epoxy, so I'm going to do them all at once. I've got several of them here. And then this one is particularly difficult, so I'm going to take the leg off and then fill this and then do it all in one batch. So let me unbolt that leg and we'll do this whole thing all at one time. Okay, so in order to pull this one off, I'm going to have to use some tape, build a bit of a form so the epoxy doesn't run out. And this one is got quite a void. That'll work. I won't let it sit over this. So let's mix the epoxy up. Alrighty, this is a 1-to-1. This will probably make about one of these, I guess. That'd be enough. Alrighty, and give this a little mix. Alright, so pour a little bit in here. There's a gash in there from the planer, and I want to level that out. We'll go through all these knots that are here. Those are the problem areas. Best to leave it a little high and then sand it later. Now this is the most difficult. I'm going to put it over the end and pour if any goes, let it go onto the floor. I'm not quite sure how much it's going to take to get in there. It's kind of a big one. Alright, now this one here is a long crack. Let's see. Yeah, it's a long crack here, and I want to make sure that's filled. Alright, so here's an example of what I'm doing here. I'm proud all the time. Like on that one, you can see that it is above the knot. And if you look very carefully here, we're above the knot. And then on something like this, where it's seeping in and going around the corner, it doesn't go all the way through, but it goes quite a ways, so I'm having to periodically fill this right here as it drains into the void, and then I'll bring a little bit more in and keep filling it back up. I may have to come back a second time on that one because I've added quite a bit and it's still going down. Well, it's the next morning and the epoxy is cured, and in some places we are ready to go. Like some of these cracks, it's cured really well. It's very hard and it's proud, which means I can sand it down smooth. But some of the deeper ones, like this one, I can still feel a divot. So it looks like I'll have to go back over things like this and fill them a little bit higher. And this crack over here, take this tape off. Okay. And then I can still feel that crack. So I think what happened is, that void progressed deep into the wood and there's nothing on the bottom. And so the epoxy kept seeping down into the void. So I'll have to do this a couple more times probably, and I might switch to a faster epoxy so I don't have to wait a full day for that. So I'm going to sand this down and see how it goes. All right, this is 3 layers of high gloss lacquer. And so this, I just applied it with a brush, and we have some areas that are really, really good. And then of course you have some areas that have some minor defects. And so what I'm going to do now is rub this out, and I'm going to be using a 3-step process. We'll start with 400 grit sandpaper, and we'll flatten it, and then I will move on to a rubbing compound and then a polishing compound with my dual action random orbital sander. Okay, now we're going to switch to a yellow pad, which is going to be a polishing pad. Whoops. And then we're done with rubbing compound. And I'm going to put on some wax polishing. Probably do it. It's just as smooth as can be. So I was just finishing up the second operation here, actually the third. We did 400 grit, then we did a coarse pad, and this is the fine pad, and then I just used car wax. And so there you go. So here it is, we're all done. This has been rubbed out and it's looking really nice. So I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. And here you can see that where we had chip out from the planer, it's completely filled. That's pancake flat. And all these knots are just as smooth as can be. And I'm very, very happy with how it turned out.